Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Junior is on the cusp of the Philippine presidency. Even 20 years ago, another Marcos in Malacanang, well, that would have been unthinkable. For more, we're joined now by Professor Aries Arugay from the University of the Philippines. Professor, you've blamed the disinformation infrastructure as a key pathway for what you said is Marcos' plan to reach the presidency. Now that we see he may be on the cusp of winning the presidency, but he's always denied the existence of any organized online campaign, particularly against his rival, his key rival, Leni Robredo. How far did social media or the use of it tip the balance in this election?
Well, actually, you have to go back because whatever the disinformation infrastructure that has really helped Marcos Jr. In this election could be traced back in 2016. And this really reveals that the Marcoses have planned this gradual ascent back to presidential power for years and for decades, compared to the very compare that opposite to the Robredo campaign, wherein she was very reluctant and merely declared her candidacy almost a few days before the official deadline. So you see that the Marcos Jr. campaign was well prepared. And from 2016 onwards, the disinformation that tried to revise history, tried to glorify the martial law years, but at the same time double down and pummel Robredo, her political party, and the so-called post-Marcos or post-EDSA governments have been relentless on social media. And while Marcos Jr. has denied this, existing studies by communication researchers revealed that in terms of consequences, it is Marcos Jr. who have benefited from disinformation over the years, while Robredo has been the main victim or the main casualty of disinformation.
Right, Professor, but there is also the issue of growing frustration among voters about the lack of progress for various quarters of the Philippine population over the years. There's been a wariness about reformist candidates like Leni Robredo as well. Many of his supporters, they come from an era that don't remember the Marcos years. Do you see his win as a rejection, perhaps, of democratic gains that were made after EDSA in 1986?
Well, the interesting thing is a lot of those who won the elections and carried out a reformist agenda are now currently allied with Marcos Jr. For example, former President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, who presented herself also as a reformist candidate. So I do think part of the disinformation is to simply blame what happened to the Philippines to the particular elite who has ruled, when we know that whatever it is that has been the cause of this resentment and frustration, that the blame should be evenly spread, because at the end, whoever the president is, the country has been ruled by dynasties from the get-go. So conveniently just pointing the fault to one set of politicians, I think reduces and even underestimates this system, this decrepit system of Philippine politics where dynasty rules over competence and track record.
Well, despite the seeming evidence, at least, of some voter irregularities and ballot box issues and so on, it does look as though he will likely be the incoming president. What do we know, though, of the manner in which he will govern? Since Marcos Jr., he wouldn't participate in televised debates. He's talked about bringing the greatness back to the Philippines. What does he mean by that?
That has been the question throughout the campaign. But because there have been very little, if not no opportunities at all for his claims to be somehow tested and be validated, because he has refused to engage in debates. He has only addressed and interfaced with his supporters. That is a question that needs to be further answered. And I think Mr. Marcos Jr. can not hide and cannot really evade those questions any longer. In the coming days, he will be pressed by media, by even, I guess, some of his supporters to provide the necessary details on how he will move the country forward and how he will really make good on his promise that he will be a unifying president.
Professor Arugay, thank you very much for that. That was Professor Aries Arugay speaking to us from Manila.